Are you about to graduate? The transition from college to adulthood and professional life is not an easy one. And as you graduate in the next few weeks, I'm sure you're going to be very overwhelmed and wondering what your next step should be. This video is going to walk you through how to create a transition plan. I'm going to share a 5-step process that I use every day in my professional job, in my daily life, anytime that I'm going to embark on a project. Hi, my name is Rosamaria. I'm a career coach for young professionals transitioning into the workplace. It includes recent college graduates, first-gen and first-gen professionals. If you came from my previous video on transitions, thank you for showing up again. Before we get started, I want to say congratulations, class of 2022. It is always amazing to see people graduating. My favorite part of living at Berkeley was seeing the graduations every year. I am a first-generation college graduate, and I know that it's not easy to graduate from college, especially during a pandemic. What I want to do is help you now transition into adulthood and the workplace seamlessly. I'm sharing a 5-step process that I use to complete projects, and I am applying this to your college transition. This training is gonna be long. Get pen and paper or get the Word document by clicking the link below. I have used this 5-step process in several ways. The most recent way that I used it was to buy a house. I was one of those people who ended up buying a house through the 2020 pandemic, the start. It was a very condensed version of this. I did not have time to invest in all of the phases, but it was the blueprint for being able to build on a step-by-step path to get to buy my house. So 2020, I had a baby in February. The pandemic hits. My company closes down. I'm on maternity leave. I am still living in the studio apartment that I was living in when I was at UC Berkeley, and I loved it. It was an ideal location for a couple without children. However, the baby came and we needed space. Buying a house was an unexpected purchase. We're going to be 2 years into being homeowners, and I can honestly say that I'm really proud of myself for how I handled the process of buying this home. I feel like I made really good decisions through the house buying process, and we now have a 4-bedroom home, and I credit this step-by-step process for that. And so really happy to share with you. Let's get started on the steps. Our first step should always be research. It doesn't matter what projects you are ever taking on. You always want a research phase. The research phase is really to set the context for anything that you're doing. For me, it was real estate. It was understanding home ownership. It was understanding price, value of houses, regions, locations, households, schooling systems. It's a big picture view, and I want you to get into the habit to do research on anything that you're going to do, a project that you're going to take, a path you're going to move forward. Research. The second phase is an action plan, is really planning, taking that research, making sense of it into an action plan. Long list of to-dos or things to remember or things to keep in mind. It is an action plan. You're not in the implementation. You are in the process of consolidating everything that you know into a digestible format. Then you move into phase 3, which is the implementation phase. It's the time when you're taking action and you're doing the work. Then you end up between 3 and 4, the troubleshooting phase. You're implementing, you're finding challenges, you're going through the troubleshooting phase, resolving challenges, going back to implementation. You're working in between those 2 phases. Sometimes you'll have to go back to phase 1, which is research. It's going back to remember what the goal was, the big picture, remember what the conversations were. And then once you resolve the challenges that you face in the troubleshooting phase, the idea or the goal would be that you complete the phase. And so that's where we want to end. We want to end with a positive result or outcome. You're a college graduate and you have options. What should you do next? You could either find a job that is kind of a placeholder. It's the job that you use it to pay the bills. It holds you over until the next step. Maybe you're ready for that job in your field or career. It's that job that's going to get you started to where you want to go in your career, or at least open the path. For those of you who are going to move back home and take some time to rest and spend a few months recovering from 4 to 5 years of schooling, that's another path. And so you also want to plan for that, even if it's leisure. Some of you may be forced to go back home because you need to give up your apartment, or you don't have any housing, or you haven't found a job, and it's at home where you're going to start the job search process. For those of you who are taking time off to go travel, you also need a transition plan. It's really important to have one, especially if you are not going to be doing something formal like going into work. For those of you who find yourself unemployed after graduation, I will make more videos on how to utilize your time, but I do want to note that it is a perfect time for you to dabble in entrepreneurship, even if things don't go as planned. Just getting into the process of thinking of ideas and trying to execute them, those are really valuable experiences and skill sets that you can take into the workplace. And so if you find yourself unemployed, think about an entrepreneurship idea that you can take on for the learning. We'll cover entrepreneurship in another video. I'm sure many of you are ready to get back to school and do grad school. That's always a fun one. If I could go back to grad school again, I would. Not always a practical choice, but it's always a fun choice. We are going to talk about 3 different paths. I'm going to focus on job search, but I'm going to show you how you adapt this process to the different paths that I mentioned before. Most of you are going to be doing some job searching, trying to land a job because you got responsibilities, bills to pay. There are some of you who have more flexibility with travel or having time off or choosing to go to grad school. So the grad school and solo traveling is more of an example, and we're going to walk through the job search option. What does the research phase mean in the context of the job search process? The goal of doing exploratory research is to get a big picture view. I want you to understand the big context, the big picture about anything that you're doing, your industry or your job or some action that you want to take. What is the range of information that I need to know? I want you to do some industry research, company research, and job research. I want you to get out of this preliminary research is to see the big picture and then to connect it to the smaller picture. Looking for articles that are in depth about your industry or your sub-industry, and that could include reports, in-depth news articles, anything that really offers some insight on the industry, where it's at, where it's going, where are the challenges, where are the opportunities. That's what I want you to get a sense of. Are you excited about the industry as a whole and the different opportunities? Is there a small part of an industry that really is alluring to you? I want you to do the same thing for companies. Find a few of the companies that you like and compare them, and to see what do you like about these companies, where would you like to grow, what is the value add that each one has. I also want you to do the same thing for positions within these companies. Do a comparison and a contrast on how they're similar and how they're different. All of that is going to give you language for you to be able to communicate if you were asked something in the interview process, or just some really good insight to have really good conversations in interviews, both the interviews when you're being hired, but interviews with the people in the field. This is what exploratory research would look like for somebody going to grad school. In the research phase, you're looking for articles in your field of interest. So if you want to become a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist, you're doing that research for that field. You're looking at articles, publications, you're looking at programs that would be suited for you, that would help you realize whatever career goal that you have. You may be looking at subspecialties. Some programs are dual degrees, so being able to decide or understand if those would be a good fit for you is important. This is what it would look like for somebody who's decided to travel for a year. You're looking at travel programs that you can connect yourself to so that you're not alone in the process, especially if you're a newbie to traveling. You want to do good research on how you get started before you get started. A secondary part of the research phase is interviews, and I think that this is the most important part. I want you to do interviews with different types of people because I want you to collect different types of information. I want you to collect different types of experiences, insights, and tips and strategies. In the job search section, I have career center staff, professors, working professionals, peers, and networks. And they're all very different, but they all add value to your transition plan. A career center staff person will tell you what resources are accessible to you through your university. And you may or may not use them, but it's important for you to have and to know about them. You take that information and you put it in your action plan. Professors, the most underutilized resource when it comes to career planning, are experts in their field. So they're producing research. They are being asked by nonprofits to review material. They're invited to roundtables, conferences. They are connected in so many different ways that you probably don't know because you see them just as a professor. But in my professional experience, we are constantly working with professors and researchers. Schedule an office hours with a professor in your field and talk to them about your career goals and ask them about the industry or what they're doing in the field. Working professionals, they're going to be sharing insights about the job, what they don't like, the challenges, the opportunities. Maybe they can connect you to other working professionals and current opportunities in the field that you're interested. Of course, your peers. Some of you may have a friend who graduated a year before you, and they are the ones that you want to get information on how they went through the process, their regrets, their best tips. Regardless of the path that you're going to take, I want you to do interviews with experts. They don't have to be long, 30 to 40 minutes, an hour if they want to be generous. And I want them to be tailored questions so that you get insight related to their experience. This is what it would look like for somebody who's going to go to grad school. Program chairs, professors in the department, regular professors, current students, students in other programs. And what you're trying to do is to get many points of views into the decision that you want to make. You want a big picture view, and everybody has a small piece of the puzzle from where they sit. So the program chair sees things differently than the professor, than the current student, than the grad student. You want to be able to ask very unique questions tailored to those experiences. Same thing for the solo traveler. You want to interview the current travelers, and you want to interview female travelers if you are a woman who is going to do solo traveling. Ask the questions that are relevant to who you are. So if I was a female traveler, I would be concerned with safety issues and precautions. The beginner traveler, you're a beginner, you need to look for beginners who are at least 6 months to a year in and see what their challenges were. Experienced travelers, how do you do this for the long haul? Those are the questions that are very unique to the type of interviewee that they are. Create the interview list so that they all offer you unique experiences and give you insight to the unique vantage points. Now, the action plan. Consolidate, synthesize all of the research that you did, the reading and the interviews, into a digestible format, and really work through creating unique or insightful questions based on that information. You don't know when the information is going to be used. It could be used in an interview, but it's more likely going to be used when you're asking somebody else something. It could be an informal conversation that you're having with an expert when you're telling them that you're doing, the job search. All of this information is going to eventually be shared by you to somebody. The more that you understand the big picture and the small picture, the better communicator that you are going to be able to be, the more people will see you as an expert before you're actually an expert. In this space, you're also going to set up the project management system. It is so important for you to have a project management system to help you meet deadlines and not lose momentum in the process. This is what it would look like for somebody in grad school. You also want to summarize your research, develop thoughtful questions, have due dates, decide on the programs you're going to apply, set up your project management system. A solo traveler, you should also have a travel action plan with insights from the interviews, challenges, and how to overcome them. You want to highlight the most important things that you need to know when you are out and about as a solo traveler. And you also need a project management system. Once you have your action plan, you're going to move into the implementation, and this is where you take action. The job search path is going to take you to updating your LinkedIn profile, your cover letter, resumes, reference lists, developing interview questions that are tailored, creating thank you emails, preparing for mock interviews, going to interviews, sending thank you emails. This is what it would look like for somebody in grad school. You're taking your test, you're asking for letters of recommendations, you're writing personal statements, you're requesting transcripts, you're applying to the programs. For somebody who's solo traveling, you're buying your gear, your essentials, you're making a solo trip to test out the waters and how it feels to be on your own, close by and then a little bit further away. And every time you take a solo trip that is a little bit further away, you're taking notes, you're trying to figure out and problem solve the challenges that you face in that trip. And that takes us to the troubleshooting phase. This is the phase where you're doing things and you're finding that there's no momentum, you're not getting any traction, you're not going as fast as you want it to be. This is the time where you reflect. If you are in the job search phase and you feel like you're not getting any callbacks, the interviews are not coming through, then you have a few things you can do. The free options, of course, is reach out to your career center at your school, reach out to the alumni network in your school, or ask a friend, a colleague, a former colleague of yours, or somebody who would be able to review your materials and assess your interviewing skills. I've done this for my friends and colleagues. I've reviewed resumes, cover letters, applications for grad schools. Utilize the resources of people in your community. And if you don't want to ask for free services, you can pay. You can find a career coach to help you. You can attend workshops. This is what it would look like for grad school. The application process can be isolating and draining, especially if you're doing it on your own. So you definitely want to reach out to the universities, or you can create your own grad school applying group. When I applied to grad school, I was going directly from undergrad to grad school, and I knew that I could not apply to grad school by myself at all. So I always create groups for everything. And so there was a group of 3 to 4 of us who were applying. We were reading each other's statements. We were asking each other the questions. We were vetting each other's ideas. We were, preparing for the tests and applying to the programs and celebrating each other for accomplishing it. And it works so well. So in this virtual time, you can do this. If you need more hand holding because you have very specific questions, look for a paid coach who can help you. Troubleshooting for the solo traveler looks different. You need to be tracking the kind of unexpected challenges that are coming up in your traveling experience so that you have the questions to ask people when you find them. Definitely be joining the travel groups on social media, watching YouTube video. If you find that you need a real conversation, one thing that I would do is to email a solo traveler who I feel I can connect with and see if they're open for a paid consultation. And then the last phase is really to celebrate. By this time, you may have reached the end of the phase, the process. You reached a result or a goal. it's not always a result that you want. So maybe for those of you who are applying to grad school, the result was your top tier school, but you are going to your second tier. You got a result, but it was a little bit different. Regardless of what the results turn out to be, you need to celebrate. We need to get into the habit of celebrating reaching milestones even when the results are not the most ideal. So if you've landed a job, I want you to celebrate landing the job, but I also want you to start planning for the next year. If you're going to travel for a certain time, I want you to celebrate the fact that you've invested all this time in doing the research and headed out, but then also carve some time to prepare for your next milestone. If you are applying to grad school, I want you to celebrate that regardless of whether or not you get in. And if you do then get in, celebrate that as well. And then make a transition plan to outline how you're going to transition again back into school. I want you to remember that this does not have to take a lot of time. When I used this process to buy my house, I had a baby. I was confined to a studio with 5 of us because my mom was helping us caretake. We were in lockdown. My husband was traveling. We were gonna move an hour away, so we could only look at houses on the weekends, and it was crazy. I was just watching YouTube videos, taking down notes and scribbles in a notebook. I didn't even have the time to have it look pretty. I conducted 5 interviews, 2 with real estate agents and 2 through 3 with people I knew. One who was in the city that I ended up moving into, another one in a nearby city that I was considering. And then I was asking questions of just people that I knew that had bought homes. That was enough research to get me what I needed to then be able to create to-do lists. I could ask thoughtful questions. And I didn't have to depend on my realtor, and I didn't have to depend on other folks to make decisions because I had enough information to make decisions quickly. The turnaround between the moment that I was like, could we afford to buy a house, to the moment that we closed, it was like a short window. It was like 3 months, but everything blurred because it all happened on weekends. And I can honestly say that I am very proud in the way that I handle the home buying process for somebody who was not prepared for the journey of homeownership. When the pandemic hit, it turned our lives upside down and we had to buy. Doing the research did give me enough information to make quick decisions, and that's what I want. I want you to be so confident in yourself that when you are posed a question, you know what the right answer is because you already did the research. And I find that a lot of people who are starting projects don't do the research. Sometimes they'll start in the implementation and backtrack into the action plan, and sometimes they'll have an outline of the action plan and move into an implementation, and they're struggling between action plan implementation and troubleshooting. It gets complicated, it gets exhausting because you're trying to plan ahead, but you can't plan ahead because you're in implementation, but you're also facing troubleshooting issues. We want you to separate the phases out. And do not skip the research phase. It is so important. And if you are going to skip part of the research phase, I do not want you to be skipping the interviews. The interviews are probably the most insightful parts of the research projects. That's when you take what you read in articles and that's where you vet it. That's where you get and you test whether or not something that was written out in the public forum is true in the practical sense. If you are going to be skipping something in the research, it should not be the interview. I hope that you found this training helpful, and if you have very specific questions, drop them down in the comments section. If you need more tailored support, you can join one of my weekly Saturday sessions. I hold them at 10 a.m. Pacific time. It's rapid fire coaching for folks who are graduating and transitioning into the workplace and adulthood. So you can sign up for one of those sessions. They are small so that we can go deep into discussion when needed. Again, congratulations on graduating, And for all of you who are the first in your families to graduate from college, know that I am so proud. Know that I can only imagine how much effort that you had to put into getting the diploma. And know that it matters, and that you are going to be a role model for young people who are looking for people who look like them. So congratulations, and subscribe to the channel if you want to be notified of the subsequent videos that are coming around this transition.